I know it. I will now call the 7 o'clock County Commission meeting to order. Call on Mr. Johnson for the invocation.
Thanks, sir. Let's pray, please. Lord, again, it is an honor to come in your presence, and we thank you for the opportunity. And, Father, we just come to you as your servants, and we humbly ask you for wisdom. We pray that, Father, you will illuminate our minds, that we may comprehend the facts before us, that we may attain a full understanding of these matters. We may make just decisions and make wise decisions in a manner that will please you, that will benefit the folks of this county, and glorify your Son, the Lord Jesus. For it's in his name we ask it. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Call on Mr. Mashman for adjustments to the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of adjustments under administrative matters. I'd like to add item T, and that would be to call for a public hearing for the release of jurisdiction to some property owned by NGK for NGK expansion, and that would be releasing to the city of Mooresville. And what this does is calls for a public hearing on that release for February the 5th. Under closed session, 2 items to be added. GS 143-318-11A4, Economic Development, and then GS 143-318-11A5, Property Acquisition. Mr. Chair, those are the adjustments to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Masternardi. Any additional adjustments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the board, I'd like to, under closed session, also add legal to that if we could.
Okay. Okay, any additional? If not, do I have a motion to accept the adjustments to the agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any questions? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Ayes have it. We will now open the meeting up to public hearings. We'll call on Mr. Ben Garrison, please.
Good evening. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow citizens to have input into our FY09 North Carolina Department of Transportation Community Transportation Program Grant application, and also to ask that you adopt a resolution that would allow myself as a transportation director for Iredell County to submit the application on behalf of Iredell County. The deadline for application submission with DOT is January 31st, 2008. I did publish a notice of this public hearing in the Statesville Record Landmark on Sunday, December the 30th, as part of the application requirement. Also, the notice was prepared in Spanish and posted on vehicles and in strategic locations is also part of the requirement. No one has contacted us to request information about the hearing or express a desire to speak at this hearing. NCDOT makes community transportation possible by providing administrative and capital funding. This year's application contains the following requests. Administrative is $250,008. There's a 15% local match required. Under capital, it's $290,550 with a 10% local match required. Under capital, the project includes the replacement of 7 vehicles, of which 5 are lift-equipped vehicles, 1 is a conversion van, and 1 is a light transit vehicle. ICATS is an enterprise fund, and the local match is obtained from our contract service fees and passenger fares. The application will be reviewed by the NCDOT and actually go to the Board of Transportation in May of 2008. Just for information, for the current fiscal year, or the first 6 months of this current fiscal year, we've provided 58,213 passenger trips. We have traveled 473,634 vehicle service miles in our county, and we have provided 24,784 vehicle service hours and operated 157 days. On many days, and one of which is tomorrow, we are scheduling over 600 passenger trips per day. And on the part of ICATS and the passengers that we serve, we would like to offer our support and thank you for your support of community transportation. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Garrison? Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Do we have anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor or against this request? If not, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt this resolution and allow Mr. Garrison to submit this application on behalf of Iredell County.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Are there any questions regarding the motion? If not, all in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next item, Mr. Ron Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. We have one rezoning before you tonight. This is a request from KAMCO, Inc. The property is located on 919 Brawley School Road. They would like to rezone the property from RA, residential agriculture, to RO, residential office. The property is 1.27 acres approximately, and is currently occupied by a house. It's primarily vacant, but there is an old residential structure on the property that is to be destroyed. It's surrounded by residential and office uses, and you all are familiar with Brawley School Road to know that it's a various mix of uses and a lot of cars located in this general vicinity. It is located in the critical area of the watershed, and again, being on Brawley, this is one of many tracks that are in transition that we've had to deal with several times over the last several years. This property. This is a map of the property with the current zoning. The hatched area is an RPO, our Roadway Protection Overlay 2, which is along Brawley School Road. But the property itself is zoned RA. That's why it's colored white underneath there. There is an RO property further down Brawley and another RO CUD going back towards Williamson Road. The future land use plan shows this area as transitional, and which was also validated in our Brawley School Road plan as well. And this is for office uses and institutional uses that are something of a buffer between higher intensity commercial and residential. This is looking at it from the air, from our aerial photo. This is Mallard Head Golf Course back here to give you the location of it. And the clusters, if I'm not mistaken, there's multifamily duplex types of development across the street and on going back towards Williamson Road. And these are all the adjoining property owners if we need to reference any. This is taking a look at the property itself. This is a house that's currently on there that will be removed if rezoned. The applicant would like to move another structure to this site after taking this one off. This is looking back towards Mallard Head. Across the street at the houses that I was talking about, there are some other older single-family houses that there's been some change in some of those uses. And this is looking back towards Williamson Road. And another portion of the property and to the next door neighbor going back towards Williamson. This is one of the few rezonings we've had recently with no conditions. We feel like RO is a good use for this particular piece, and that the RPO, if this develops under our standards, would protect Brawley School Road and the development that is make the type of development that would occur very similar to what we're seeing on other parts of Brawley. The Planning Board recommended 10-0 in favor of this request, and we would also like to recommend in favor of it as well. There was a question about the right-of-way, and I think that the right-of-way issue for this particular property has been totally taken care of and has been obtained by the state. I think the applicants, if they wish to speak, could probably talk a little bit more to that if you need that. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Just a comment, Mr. Smith. What I think prior to your return, what the concern of the board was is that a piece of property was going to be RA or R20 or some residential use, and then we were going to be asked to rezone it to some type of commercial use, and that was consequentially going to raise the price, and we were afraid the DOT was going to run out of money and not be able to purchase the right-of-ways. So we took action better than a year and a half ago, I guess, where we would like to see DOT matters settled before the person is allowed to petition for rezoning. That was, I think, what prompted Mr. Robertson's question at the briefing.
Okay, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's done?
I can address that.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Jim Miller, part of KAMCO. I'm the CAM. My father is. Kruger, Allen, and Miller. Don Allen was a surveyor. You all might know he was in with us on it. The right-of-way is done. It's already been taken on all the property that we have. We have the 2 lots beyond, going toward Mallard Head. They've torn down where Lake Norman Times used to be. We had them tear that building down. And we are in the brick building right before you get to Mallard Head. And that has been condemned for exactly about 18 inches of construction easement. They want the front 18 inches in the front porch. So we bought it back from the state in hopes to move it to the adjacent properties. And so that's our plan as it stands. We have a 90-day contract with the state. Once they let the bids, they're supposed to know when they're going to let the bids, give us 90 days to get off of it. If not, we lose a $5,000 performance bond, which they would then tear it down, or we would sell it to have it moved. But we've been there since the mid-'80s in that same property, which we own both the Lake Norman Times, rented to them, and this property. So our goal is to move it up Brawley School Road onto that property and just keep it.
Okay.
But yeah, the monies have exchanged hands. The state now has, and that acreage is now 1 acre, not 1.2. It's just a hair over an acre. They took almost a quarter acre off the front of that track. So that has been done. Matter of fact, we had to get together with the tax people to really determine the values because they still had it listed as all the buildings there and us owning them.
Thanks.
So that's all been taken care of. Any questions? Thank you.
Any additional questions from anyone on the board? If not, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor or against this request? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'm looking, we don't have a specific wording in this one.
Not on this
I
one.
don't think you've ever done one this simple, have
Yeah,
you?
No findings of fact or anything. It's
Okay,
not
good enough.
conditional use.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we rezone this property as requested.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, likewise. Okay. Mr. Smith, thank you.
The second item I have for you tonight is an amendment to our zoning ordinance. We've discussed this proposal several times. The request is to go from our current way of handling conditional use rezonings to a new conditional zoning district method. This was permitted statewide back in 2005. The state made several major changes to the planning statutes, and this was one of those major changes. However, it was used for several years by the Mecklenburg County towns, and they were allowed to do that by special legislation. The intent of putting this into our ordinance is, well, we have several reasons for doing this. The first is that we need a method to deal with particular circumstances. You know, when one particular request has an impact on the surrounding area and maybe the community as a whole, there needs to be the ability of the county to put conditions on that property and to do that legally. The CUD allowed us to do that for many years, and now this conditional zoning district should also allow us to do that. This will also make the process much easier for the staff and the commissioners to implement and administer. We'll take the if approved, we'll take the quasi-judicial process out of the rezoning itself and deal with this legislatively, which will all make it much easier for this group. The major differences, like I said, this is legislative, not quasi-judicial. If approved, we will not be swearing people in, taking evidence. There will be the ability to talk to the applicants, talk to those that are for or against a request, and obtain any information that you feel is prudent to either approve or deny the request that's before you. Some of the changes in the process itself, it's fairly similar, but we've tried to tighten this up because we've got a history and we've watched how the CUDs, the existing process, goes along. We're trying to make the process better while changing it. We're requiring a conceptual site plan. That's not a site plan that's going to be specific in that we'll tie an applicant directly to what's on there, but we need to know what is going to be occurring with the rezoning. If it's going to be a shopping center, they need to show a shopping center. If it's going to be multifamily housing, we need to see that. And in this, the planning director will have the authority to give and take a little bit once they are approved. So the conceptual site plan will be adequate up front as long as we can finalize that and make it more site specific as we go along. A second major change is a requirement for a public input meeting. Right now, our standard process is to go through the planning board, come to the commissioners, and gain an approval or a disapproval. Through this process, what we're proposing is that there be a public input meeting put on by the applicant, working with our staff to try and figure out number one, the impacts of the proposed rezoning and who needs to know about the rezoning. Once that happens, in theory, we hope that this will put to rest some of the questions and some of the fears people have before we even get to the planning board. It'll help the planning staff make a recommendation, and I think it'll help the planning board make a better recommendation to you as it comes forward to you for the final decision. We have put in several specific standards for review, so when we go through the process, we're going to look at certain things. Most of them are basic, but the one to keep in mind is whether or not this is a spot zoning. So in the ordinance, in the proposed ordinance, we've put 3 criteria to help us qualify what is a spot zoning and what might be an illegal spot zoning. You can't really tell that for sure till you get to court, but it will help this board to go through the process and know if this is leaning in the right direction or the wrong direction as in regards to spot zoning. There will also be a mandatory review of the progress of any approved project. Once a property is rezoned, the applicant would have the ability to go ahead and begin or not begin a project. If after 18 months, after 18 months, the planning director or the staff will have the ability to go in and take a look and see what has happened to that particular project during that time. If nothing has happened and there is some justifiable reason, then we'll recommend to the commissioners in a written report, we'll let it go. You know, that's something that they're just moving along, or they have had this problem and can't move forward. But if it just appears that the project is not going to go forward, we'll send a written recommendation to the Board of Commissioners that this project should probably revert back to what it was originally before it was rezoned. So that's given us a good bit of flexibility to review the status of a project, not really to have a lot of oversight when they start construction, but making sure they're doing what they said they were going to do, and then if they're not, then it would revert back if you so chose. And then finally, another big change is that right now it's pretty strict as to how quickly you can come back before our planning board if you get denied. Also, if the planning board hears a case, and Penske was a good example of this, if the planning board hears a case and then the facts change halfway to come into the Board of the Commissioners, we put into the process the ability for us to take that back to the planning board. That is, right now, it's impossible to do that, and other than waiting at least 6 months. So now, under the proposal at least, you could take it back if the facts change, and the planning board would re-review it and give another recommendation based on the updated information.
Would we have to send it back, or would it be, is there some trigger there?
No, I could decide, well, the planning director could decide if the facts have changed, and it could go back automatically.
Okay.
And finally, all of our existing conditional use districts, and you all know we've been doing a lot of those, would be grandfathered. Because it's a very similar process, we would grandfather those in as well as their conditions, and then if there is a change or if there's a proposed change, we would deal with them through the new process and deal with them as a conditional district. So the planning board recommended in favor of this. The planning staff is very much in favor of this. I think it will help our process overall. There is one more step for an applicant, but I think that overall it will help the applicant as well as they go through and try and navigate and get and obtain an approval. And I'd be glad to try and answer any questions that you've got.
Ron, with this extra step, will this delay the process more than it is now, or will it kind of still fit in the same time frame?
I think we can. It'll probably delay it a little bit. I would say by probably 2 weeks. So it will be a delay, but not by much. And it depends on how the developer can schedule that meeting. The way that our process is now is we've actually had to lengthen it out because most of our requests have been more difficult. I hate to dummy it down, but the good land's gone and everything else we've got to get creative with. So everything's taking a little bit more time. I think that the extra 2 weeks, or even if it ends up being a month, will benefit them in the end.
This public input meeting, will that be held here at the planning board, or where will it be held?
It will be held wherever, we'll offer up our conference room or a room, depending on how many people we think it's going to be. But typically, we're putting that on the developer or the applicant or whoever's going through it to hold the meeting, take minutes, give a report of what happened, any changes to the application, and we'll always have a staff member there. So we'll be there listening. I don't know that we'll say much on these unless we're specifically asked, but it's going to be up to the developer.
So more than likely to be held in the community wherever the rezoning is.
And I hope so. I hope so. That would probably be the best way and get more people out that way.
Yeah, that was the question I had, Mr. Smith. Where would be the location of the meeting? As you've written ordinances, it's implied that the meeting will be held in the community where the application originated. I would ask you to encourage the applicant to do that. Try to hold a public meeting that's near to the spot that the applicant is seeking to rezone as possible.
Makes sense.
I think you'll have greater community participation. And it may be difficult for some people to imagine, but some people are intimidated by this place sometimes.
That's true. That's true. That's not a problem. I would say that you're exactly right. They would get more input if it's a familiar place, right. And we'll try to encourage that as much as we can.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone in the audience that wishes to speak in regards to this request, in favor or against it?
Mr. Chairman, I did forget one question. Mr. Smith, are there any rezoning cases that remain in the ordinance you're aware of that will constitute a quasi-judicial proceeding?
No rezonings, only variances and special use permits going through the Board of Adjustment.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Okay, any additional questions? Again, anyone from the audience wishing to speak in favor or against this request? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we adopt the proposed amendments to the Iredell County zoning ordinance, Articles 17, conditional use districts.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the motion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against, likewise. Mr. Smith.
Our final request tonight, or my final request, is we have been, our department has been working with the state and the federal government, primarily the state, the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management. And we are updating our flood damage prevention ordinance and the associated maps that go along with that. We are required to do this to comply with the National Flood Insurance Program, the NFIP, to which we are currently in good standing. We're in a situation where we have until March 18th, 2008 to have adopted a new ordinance and new maps adopted in order to retain our good standing. If we go beyond that time, we could possibly lose that. And that has some pretty big effects on flood insurance for those that need it, that are located in flood-prone areas. So what we're dealing with is again, a two-pronged process. We've got a new ordinance that we've taken, and we've worked straight from the state model ordinance to draft. Ben Steichleather with our office has been talking with Ed Curtis, who are both here, to make sure that we are meeting their standards and going along with regulations that will meet the state's requirements, but at the same time trying to not change what we already have when it comes to specific requirements. The second part of this is adopting the maps, and I'll show you the maps in just a minute. For years, we have worked off of the FERM maps, is what we call them, which are a set of maps that have the map floodplains on for the entire county as well as the cities, with no property lines. The roads are kind of tough to make out. They're very difficult to maneuver. The new set of maps that we have are much better, much more accurate, and the most important part is most areas have a designated base flood elevation. The base flood elevation is important to determine exactly where, if a building is built, what exactly where the floodplain exactly comes on that particular property. I'll go ahead and show you the maps. This is an old map. This is what we've been working on for years, ever since we've been part of the program. This is Shiloh Road here, and Third Creek, which runs across Shiloh. Here, we've kind of got the luxury of some elevations in our old map, and this is a 1998 map, if I'm not mistaken. But as you can see, if someone comes in and wants to build on a particular piece of property here, it's very difficult for us to really be specific at all and help them to tell them what is and what is not in the floodplain. This is a cross-section of the new maps, which shows the floodway, which is the area of no build, essentially, and then the flood-prone areas on the outside of the floodway. And as you can see, these numbers are all elevations. They're all base flood elevations. Whereas on the old map, we've got 3. On the new map, we've got many. And what this is it's really showing, it's a much more detailed study than what we've had in the past. And we are also having to adopt this ordinance to also keep up with the maps because there's more detail to them, there's more explanation and things of that nature. So again, we are complying with the program that we're in, the NFIP, and we have publicized this public hearing. We have sent out, I was corrected, we had to notify 9,000 property owners in the county of these changes. Some of the maps are going to change as far as their impact on properties, but it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. We had a lot of calls on this, had to do a lot of research and searching of people's property, but just because these are adopted does not mean that we are really changing our regulations. This is just a different way of mapping them, and we're just trying to comply with a national program. Town of Mooresville has already adopted theirs. Troutman has heard theirs but has tabled it. They had a few questions, and Statesville has had 1 reading. So what we were shooting for was a March 18th, 2008 effective date for all of the towns, so everyone's on the same page. We've had to work pretty closely with them to get this done. So I'd be glad to try and answer any questions that you have on this, and if I can't, I've got either Ben or Ed here to help me out.
So this new, these revisions don't impact the agricultural community. This is primarily for building structures in these designated areas, correct?
That's true. Now, if a farmer were to build a structure, you know, they'd still have to keep out of the floodway and have to adhere to the same standards. But no, agricultural uses in general would not be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to publicly thank Mr. Curtis for his assistance in this. I don't think it would have been possible without him. And I thank Mr. Stockleather. I had a few calls early on, and people were asking me about it, and I probably appeared to be about as dumb to them as they thought I was before they called. But Mr. Stockleather gave me a 2-minute session by telephone, and I was able to answer questions from then on. But I thank you fellows for your work.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from board members? Do you have anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in regards to this floodplain? Come up front, please, ma'am. You come to the mic, please, and state your name.
My name is Judy Honeycutt. I'm a property owner in one of the county areas. When I got the letter about the new ordinance, it indicated that the ordinance would be available on the planning department's website, and I have not been able to find it there. Since it will affect my property, I'd like to be able to see the ordinance, and I want to find out how I can do that. There's a copy right here. Great, thank you very much.
Any additional questions, Ms. Honeycutt?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in regards to the floodplain? If not, board members ready to vote on? Okay, I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the new FEMA floodplain maps and the flood damage prevention ordinance revisions.
Thank you, Ms. Robertson. Any questions regarding the motion? If not, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. 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 Those opposed likewise. This ends our public hearings. Call on Mr. Mashman.
Mr. Chair, the following matters have been approved for placement as consent agenda items. Item A is a request from the Iredell-Statesville School System for approval of a capital outlay budget amendment. Item B is approval of an interlocal agreement with the town of Harmony regarding zoning assistance. Item C is approval of a resolution of intent in conjunction with the abandonment of T Lane or SR 2957. The resolution calls for a public hearing on February the 5th, 2008. Item D is approval of the Transportation Improvement Program or TIP priority list, and it also authorizes the planning director to present this to the Transportation Board. Item E is approval to accept grant funding from the Kate B. Reynolds Charitable Trust for a Healthy Carolinians program. Item F is approval of the Health Department's write-off of uncollected patient accounts. Item G is approval of the December refunds and releases. Item H is approval of a solid waste security light contract for the Harmony Transfer Station site. Item I is approval of a 2-year contract for cellular amplifier equipment and service with Sprint Solutions Incorporated. That's a request by the Sheriff's Department. Item J is approval to award a contract to Nixon Power for a generator system to be used for the detention center in the amount of $152,939. Item K is approval of a 60-month rental agreement for network printers with Kearns Business Solution, and that's for the Social Services Department. Item L is approval of budget amendment number 30 to accept Criminal Justice Partnership Program discretionary funding for the purpose of renovating the building at 227 Harrill Street, and also to allow the appropriate punishment option staff to occupy the building upon completion of the renovations. And this further authorizes the county manager to negotiate a lease with the terms with the APO. Item M is approval of budget amendment number 31 for the replacement of 3 law enforcement canines. Item N is a approval of budget amendment number 32 to purchase a secure view receiver for mobile telephones, and that's for the Sheriff's Department. Item O is approval of budget amendment number 33 for a copy machine replacement, and that's also for the Sheriff's Department. Item P is approval of a site suitability contract with municipal engineering on parcels known as the Steele and Fanjoy properties, and also approval to amend the capital project ordinance. Item Q is approval of a resolution calling for a public hearing on Tuesday, January the 29th at 7 p.m. concerning the financing of certain school facilities and land acquisition to provide for expansion of solid waste disposal facility pursuant to an installment financing agreement. Item R is approval of a right-of-way agreement and authorization for the county manager to sign the same, and that's property on Highway 3 or Cottle Creek Road, and it's on the Mooresville graded school site. Item S is approval of the December 18, 2007 minutes. And item T is to call for a public hearing on NGK release of jurisdiction to the town of Mooresville. I think those are the consent agenda items, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mashman. Do we have any additional corrections to the agenda, consent agenda? If not, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Any questions regarding the motion? All in favor, please say aye. 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 Those opposed, likewise. Announcements of vacancies occurring on boards and commissions. Outer County Zoning Board of Adjustments, 4 announcements. Purchase and Development Rights Technical Review Committee, 2 announcements. Board of Equalization Review for 2008, 6 announcements. Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee, 1 announcement. Appointment to boards and commissions, Safety Plan Board, ETJ, 1 appointment. Do we have anyone for that?
Move to table to our next meeting.
Motion to table. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, likewise.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, Mr. Stockleather's still here. I've asked a dozen people, I bet, if they'd be willing to serve on this ETJ board. And Mr. Stockleather and Mr. Smith come in contact with a lot of people from time to time that they may have known someone in the ETJ. And if you can forward their name to us, I'll be glad to call them and ask them. Yes, sir. We'll look around. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Nursing Home Advisory Committee, 4 appointments.
These 2 people that's referenced here, which board is that for?
Home and Community Care.
Home Health?
HCCVG.
Yes,
Home
the
and
next one.
Community Block Grant.
Okay.
You want to table that? Motion to table?
Motion to table. Yes.
Okay. Motion to table. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed. Home and Community Care Block Grant Committee, 2 appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate Mildred Johnson.
Okay.
And Vicki Cobb. Excuse me, go ahead.
I nominate Vicki Caldwell.
Okay. We got 2 nominations. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Ayes have it. Criminal Justice Partnership Program Committee, 2 appointments.
Chairman, I'd like to nominate Ron Shoemaker for one of the at-large.
Okay, Ron Shoemaker. Anyone else? Have a motion to close on the one set name at this time?
So move, we appoint Mr. Shoemaker by acclamation, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business? Okay, public comment period. I'm aware we do have one speaker, Mr. Crosby, Victor Crosby. And multi-county projects is what you want to talk about, Mr. Crosby? Okay. You have 3 minutes for that, Mr. Crosby.
Yes, requesting that you have copies of this, but I'll read it for the record. The 7 counties, Iredell, Alexander, Wilkes, Yadkin, Davie, and Rowan and Cabarrus, were originally all part of Rowan County. My late father-in-law, Lee Alexander, myself, my children, my grandchildren, for 100 years have produced food, feed, fiber, and other farm products and delivered to all 7 counties. Before that, the area produced an abundance of alcohol that could be used for trucks, tractors, lawnmowers, cars, and electric generators. During the entire history of that area, water power is used for all industry. All of these counties share water supplies from the Yadkin River watershed. These 7 counties could work together to develop water resources, sewer projects, energy development, transportation, communication, and medical services. I have contacted all 7 counties to see if they're interested in working together, and they have expressed a desire to meet in Iredell County as a central location to see what can be done. The Rural Development Administration have said that they have money for multi-county projects that is not available for individual counties. I would request your support to start these valuable projects for these counties.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Additional comments or concerns?
Well, if you have time, I further contact them about the Tri-County Medical Park, which was set up to serve 5 of these counties. Dr. Shearer, who is now retired for health reasons, and Tri-County Medical Park have served that area of these counties for 50 years. And since he's retired, we are searching for 2 doctors, a veterinarian, and we have been working on getting a Head Start school and a daycare center up there on this property as well. And the rescue squad and the dentist office is already there with your help. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional comments? Anyone have any questions, Mr. Crosby? Any comments? Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Any new business?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to report to the board that the Central Iowa Council of Government right now is kind of taking the stance that or taking the position that they would support counties being able to build their own roads. So far, I've been in opposition to it, and the reason that I've been in opposition to it is because we really just don't have a funding source that could handle expenses of that magnitude. And also, it seems like any time the state starts to starts to push some of the burden of funding an item onto the counties, it just grows worse and worse. You know, the school systems, originally the state was going to pay for the teachers, and then it got to where they did not pay enough for the teacher salaries, so we had to augment the teacher salaries. And then they didn't fund enough teaching positions, so now the counties have to fund entire teaching positions. And then the state took care of the facilities, and or at least the operation of the facilities, and now we have to pay for the utility bills for the facilities. So it's one of these slippery slopes where once the state so-called allows the county to build their own roads, I think very, very shortly after that, there'll be an expectation that if we want roads, that we'll have to build them ourselves. And of course, the taxpayer would receive no break in their state income taxes, yet through the property taxes and sales taxes, we would expect property owners to bear that burden for funding roads. And just to give you some idea, in the I-40, I-77 interchange is supposed to be well over $100 million. In fact, it was over $150 million, if I remember right. I mean, that's the entire annual budget for Iredell County. The Brawley School Road project is short of 50. It's not quite $50 million, and on. I mean, that's a third of our budget, so it's just not realistic, I think, that you would expect that for the state to expect counties to go in and start building the roads, and as soon as the word got out that we could build roads, I think there would be a false impression that we could build as many roads as we want. So the stance that I'm taking is that we believe that the road problem in this region is not due to a lack of county funding, but a lack of good priorities set forth and a good process to prioritize roads at the state level. And if they got that fixed, then our road problem would be fixed, and that the solution to the problem is not raising property taxes to build a road every few years. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. County Manager's report, Mr. Mashman.
I don't have anything. I would like to report just one capital project. We've run into some delays in getting the EMS base in Mooresville up and running. We're waiting for our contractor. We ended up having to put a sprinkler system in that facility, and that has delayed us some, but we anticipate within the next couple of months that we will be moving into the EMS base in Mooresville. And as indicated earlier, with the hiring of the engineering consultants for the landfill, we have now closed on the additional properties that was purchased that would allow us future expansion at our current landfill. Other than those two items, I don't have anything tonight excepting closed session, Mr. Chair.
Okay. At this time, motion to go into closed session under GS 143-318.11, item A, number 4, economic development, GS 143-318.11A, 5, property acquisition, and the other item is legal.
3.
Motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. There's no action to be taken as a result of a closed session, so I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Copy of our notes tonight.